Hello, glorious people of BookTube, and welcome to my mid-year check-in with you. This is my first time being able to do a check-in video like this because it is my first time being halfway through the calendar year and on BookTube, and I am very excited to share this occasion with you. I think that I've only read like 25 books maybe since this year started. The actual number will be here, but that is still enough books that I forgot about a number of the books that I read. So it was very fun to go back and look through all the books that I've read. I did take some notes on some of those books in a reading journal, so I'll read you some quotes from that. And I'm going to structure this video around the mid-year book Freakout tag. The original tag creators and the questions will be in the description box below. I have tried where possible to choose a different book for every one of the questions and to choose some books that I haven't spoken about on this channel yet. So these answers aren't 100% totally accurate, but they will hopefully introduce you to some books that I haven't had a chance to talk about, but I absolutely loved from this year. So let's get into the books. First up, the best book that you have read in 2021 so far. So I'm just gonna say it, the best book I've read is The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemisin, but I am saving that for the next question. So instead, I'm going to go with Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. This book was kind of part memoir, part self-help book. It is so hard to believe all of the trials that David Goggins went through in his life, both self-inflicted and inflicted upon him, and he uses those experiences to teach the reader how to overcome challenges in their own life and ultimately live the best life that they possibly can. I got so much out of this book. I thought that it was well written. It felt like it was coming from David Goggins' voice himself. I felt like he was speaking directly to me. And at the end of every single chapter, he has kind of an action plan for you, something for you to think about in the next little while, and you can even join in by hashtagging on Instagram. So I thought that was a phenomenal book. Maybe not the best book ever, definitely not going to be like my number one book of 2021, but I did give it 5 stars, and for what it was, I thought it was 100% worth reading, so Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. The second question is the best sequel that you've read so far in 2021, and for this I definitely have to say The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemisin. It is the second book in her Broken Earth trilogy after the 5th season, which I read last year, and I have not yet made it to The Stone Sky, but I cannot wait, so that's one of the books that I am going to read in the second half of 2021 for sure. The 5th season introduces us to this whole new world, and N.K. Jemisin really dives in head first. She does not give you any information before you start interacting with the story itself. She withholds a lot of information as you are introduced to these 3 female characters, and there's not much that I can say about this book without spoiling the excellent parts of it that I want you to experience for yourself for the first time while reading. But the book plunges you into this really complex political system and sort of magical science system of origins. Each of the main characters is an origin herself, and they're able to manipulate geological structures, sort of, I guess, with their minds. And that sort of magic system is totally believable. Like, it feels like it's kind of rooted in some futuristic science. And the book itself really deals with the oppression of these people and how they come to terms with being an oppressed class of citizen. The second book, however, the one we're actually talking about, The Obelisk Gate, goes to a more personal level where you really start to get invested in the characters' lives and get to know who they are and what their relationships are like at a really intimate level. So if you haven't read the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin, I highly recommend it. Question 3, a new release that you have not yet read but want to. For this, I'm going to say The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. I read The Silent Patient last year, and it wasn't one of my favorite books of the year, but I did enjoy it, and The Maidens sounds like an interesting premise as well. It just came out this month, so I'm looking forward to reading that. Question 4, a new release coming out in the second half of the year that you want to read. I don't really know. I don't really keep up with anticipated releases. I have enough on my TBR that's already been published that I don't need to think about those books until they're actually real and in my hands. Question 5, a disappointment from this year so far. For this, and I haven't read any books that I didn't like this year yet. that I just straight up didn't like. And honestly, I probably won't because I put those books down. However, there was a book that I did not like nearly as much as I thought I was going to. I ended up giving this book a 3 stars when I thought that it was going to be a 5 stars, and that was Washington Black by Ezzy Adujian. This book won the Scotiabank Giller Prize in 2018, so I thought it was going to be like this glorious piece of literary fiction that was award-winning, and yes, it did win an award, but I thought that it was going to be maybe more intricate, maybe more in-depth into the issues that it was covering, which was really to ask the question of what makes a free man. You're following a young boy who is a slave on a sugar plantation as he sort of discovers what freedom means for himself, because he is taken away by his master's brother Titch on sort of scary adventures throughout the world. And it has such like a wide scope. They go so many places, it covers so many years, but the book was like a pretty quick read, pretty easy to read. That's all good, but I just thought that it was going to dive into the themes and symbols of the book a little deeper, and it presented so many possibilities, and then I didn't feel like it really like stuck with any one of them long enough for me to really indulge in it. So I did like the book, I just didn't love the book, and that was disappointing. The next question, question 6, is what book most surprised you of 2021 so far? This book for me was a classic, and I don't read a lot of classics. They're just not the ones that are like getting the pull for me that I'm desire to read, because there's all these flashy books coming out. But it was February and I wanted like some kind of romance or something to commemorate Valentine's Day. So I went to my public library and looked up a couple contemporary romances, but they were all had holds on them and I was not thinking far enough in advance. I ended up picking up D.H. Lawrence's book, Lady Chatterley's Lover, which I thought was a cool choice because it was a banned book for quite some time. It was originally published privately in 1928. It was not published openly in the UK until 1960 after an obscenity trial against it, but the publisher won and they immediately sold 3 million copies of the book. And Wikipedia says the book soon became notorious for its story of the physical and emotional relationship between a working class man and an upper class woman, its explicit descriptions of sex, and its use of then unprintable 4-letter words. There were a lot of really detailed, lengthy descriptions of the setting of this book, as well as some of the political and class and social systems of the time, so I skipped through a lot of that stuff to get to the steamy scenes, and also the scenes of interpersonal relationships between this woman and her husband and her eventual affair. And I liked this story a lot more than I thought I was going to. I got way more invested in it than I thought that I would. I was expecting pretty much nothing from it. I was expecting to be bored. Little did I know it was one of D.H. Lawrence's goals to give a more honest and sort of kind and gentle portrayal of the sexual relationship. I found the sexual relationship in this book so honest and vulnerable, and I really appreciated that and respected D.H. Lawrence for that, especially because he was writing in the early 1900s. The next question, question 7, is my favorite new author of 2021, new to me or new in general, and this one is new to me. It's Haruki Murakami. This year I read Kafka on the Shore, which I was blown away by, and then I read Colorless Tsukuru Tazaki and His Years of Pilgrimage, which I didn't like as much, but I didn't dislike it enough to be put off by Murakami entirely. I will definitely be reading more of his works, either this year or into next year. I love the way that he seamlessly integrates dream worlds into reality in his novels, and I think that you could just get lost in the themes and symbols that he presents to you, but he doesn't spoon feed you. He really just presents this magical realist story and then expects you to do most of the work, which I love in my books. Questions 8 and 9 are your fictional crush and your favorite fictional character of the year so far. I don't know that I could say that I would have a crush, but I am going to use The Obelisk Gate to answer this question because there are 2 characters from that story that I absolutely fell in love with. The first, which I'll use for the crush question, is Alabaster, and the second that I will use for the favorite character, which definitely is my favorite character, is Hoa. And I don't want to say much more about that because it would just fill this story with too many spoilers. Question 10, a book that made you cry this year. My answer for this question is a book that it made me cry, but not in a sad way. It made me cry at the very end of the book, after I closed it, in sort of like one, out of shock that the book ended so abruptly without resolving the problems. And then two, it made me cry in that way that you do when you feel totally hopeless because there are oppressive structures in the world that you cannot overcome, and there is just nothing that you feel like you can possibly do about it, and maybe they're just so deeply ingrained in our society as to be unresolvable. That book that gave me those feelings at the end was Gutter Child by Jael Richardson. And if there's one book that you take away from this mid-year check-in, definitely make that book Gutter Child. So Gutter Child is a debut dystopian novel from Jael Richardson, and it takes place in a world that has been colonized by mainlanders, as they're called, who have displaced the saucy people to what they call the gutter. And in the gutter, the saucy people become reliant on government subsidies in a system that was not only not built for them, but was actively built against them. This happened because the saucy people, of course, fought back when the mainlanders tried to take their land, and then when the mainlanders won, they started sort of putting the saucy people in debt for like reparations against the mainlanders for the amount of death that occurred, and the saucy people are so far in debt that they almost never can get out of debt and live their lives for something other than survival. So gutter children are born with this oppressive weight on their shoulders of the debt for themselves and for everybody that came before them. And there's two genius aspects of this book, I think. First of all, the main character, Elimina, is a special case. She was a project child, so she was given to a mainland mother growing up. So she doesn't actually know her own history, and she has this internalized hatred against her own people. So we're seeing the story through her eyes. And then the second genius thing about this book is it kind of reads like a YA novel. So it's extremely accessible in its language, and the characters start out quite young in sort of a boarding school. So it's really an easy story to get into and understand, and Richardson did that intentionally so that this story can be presented to as wide an audience as possible. But even still, the story deals with such complex and troubling topics that are so important for our contemporary society. So there are some severe trigger warnings, but I definitely recommend this book. Excellent world building, excellent character development, excellent plot development. Everything was excellent. Next up, on a lighter note, question 11 is a book that made you happy, and for this, I'm going to go with The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. And I didn't even realize when I started reading this book that Richard Osman was a famous British comedian, but he's a famous person, and so a lot of people were skeptical about this book. I did not have that bias going in, and I absolutely loved the book. I thought it was hilarious while still dealing with some pretty deep issues. It's told through multiple perspectives, one of which is first person as a woman is writing in her diary, and it tells the story of these people in a retirement village who every Thursday night they get together and they discuss like unsolved murder cases, but then an actual murder occurs in the town where they live, and so they force their way into the investigation to try to solve a real murder. I literally laughed out loud on multiple occasions, and I feel like that's really hard to do in a book. Question 12, the most beautiful book that you bought this year. If you saw my book haul recently, then you know exactly what I'm going to say for this. And that is To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. However, after that, I did pick up Area X by Jeff Vandermeer, and it was way cheaper to get the whole series in one book, but the individual books for Area X are stunning. I do like the full volume as well though. So it's got the deckled edges, it's like this beautiful matte cover with the French flaps, so gorgeous as well. And then finally, question 13, what am I gonna read in the second half of the year? Like I said, I'll finish the Broken Earth trilogy. Currently I'm reading The Stand, which is 1 billion pages long, so I'm gonna get through that. Area X is on the list. Another Murakami book, probably what I talk about when I talk about running. I mean, I'll probably read Hamnet and Pachinko. I've been looking forward to those. I don't know, like everything I haven't read on my shelf. Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. Like maybe some Dune sequels. Half of a Yellow Sun by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I don't know. What am I not gonna read in the second half of the year? I gotta step up my reading game. Okay. Well, this was fun. Thank you for joining me. It was so fun to look back on the books that I've read and I had forgotten about and stress myself out for how much reading I still want to get done before the end of 2021. I've been enjoying all of your mid-year book Freakout tags, so keep creating them, and I will see you in a future video. Thank you for watching, everybody.